What's going on, everyone? So yesterday we got the first showdown and matchup between Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. Now this is a matchup that I am incredibly excited for not only now, but the foreseeable future. I mean, these are two very similar players, two guys that could be, top 5, top 10 players in the near future. These are two guys that are franchise cornerstones for both of their organizations, and two guys that can battle it out with the best. Right? Victor Wembanyama is obviously the super hyped, unicorn type player that many believe is going to be the best two-way player and one of the all-time greats. This guy has been more hyped than LeBron James even coming in the league. Now, I think expectations this year need to be a little cooled down. I think, San Antonio is going to do everything they can to protect him this year just because San Antonio, they know, hey, we're not winning anything this year. We're not going to overwork Victor Wembanyama. I wouldn't be surprised if he only plays around 60 games or something like that. You got to remember, San Antonio kind of revolutionized the resting of players. So Pop and them are going to do their best to kind of keep him as protected as possible. And Chet Holmgren, he's a guy that has something to prove, right? Rookie year last year, ends up getting hurt on a play defending LeBron James and ends up missing that entire season. Now it's this year where he is ready to go, right? And the Thunder are probably going to be a really good team. They are my sort of sleeper team, not necessarily to win or come out of the West, but just be a team that really surprises and shocks people. I think they're going to have an MVP level guy in SGA. Add in Chet, they surprised people last year. I think the Thunder are going to be a very good basketball team. And Chet could very well, both of these guys could very well be in the MVP Rookie of the Year conversation. Not MVP of the league, but winning the Rookie of the Year. And yesterday we saw Victor Wembanyama deliver 20 points, 5 rebounds, go 8 of 13 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, with 1 block, 2 steals in 19 minutes of play, which was a great stat line. Chet Holmgren in 16 minutes of play delivered 21 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist, was 7 of 10 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3, 1 block, and didn't have any turnovers. Victor Wembanyama ended up having 4. Now, again, we saw this match. Everyone's talking about the big, flex from Victor Wembanyama, even though, Chet got essentially headbutted. And even Chet addressed that and was like, well, yeah, when you get headbutted, right? And he did. If you watch that play, he put his head down and, torpedoed right into Chet. But nonetheless, it's going to be a fun little rivalry. Both of these guys are just ridiculous players. And starting with Victor Wembanyama, because he's the one that's super hyped, right? Victor Wembanyama is 19, so he has a world of growth ahead of him. This kid is, he could have spent another year and still been at the age that most guys get drafted. 7'4" height. He's got a ridiculous 7'6", 7'8" wingspan or something insane. And just a guy that can do everything. Right? He's a little slim, needs to add a little muscle, a little weight. But again, 19 years old. He's going to grow and develop into his man body. It's a guy that could play the power forward or center position, make a real impact. This guy very likely could be the number 1 player in the league in the next, 5 years or whatever. Wouldn't be surprised at all if it's in the next 2 or 3, right? As he starts to evolve, especially in today's NBA, he's the perfect, power forward center for the modern league, for the modern era, right? Not in a league where you're going to really be banging with the big boys anymore, right? A lot of these big guys, even a Joel Embiid, you see him, he loves to play out on the perimeter. That's just where we are in today's NBA. And Victor Wembanyama is that guy that can provide that stability. And I think personally what will happen is I think at some point the Spurs will end up having him primarily be the power forward and go get a defensive-minded center alongside of him and just have this just great elite backcourt or front court. And at least that's what I would do, right? Because you can always switch Victor to the 5 in spots, but develop him at the 4. He's kind of their modern Tim Duncan type player, and now you can just kind of grow and develop and build your team around him. But Victor, I could see him averaging around 20 points this season just because he is that gifted. and that much bigger than everybody, like size-wise. Like we've seen so many times where, he's at the down on the block or something, and he has like a 7-foot guy and he's like a foot taller than him, and he just kind of turns around and just like drops it in. He doesn't even like hook it in, or he just turns around and uses those long limbs of his to just kind of drop it into the basket. And so, I do expect offensively to him to be pretty good. Even if he's not, I do think defensively he's going to be great, because he is really good on the weak side help. He is really good as a blindside shot blocker. And just his size and length is going to be so disruptive. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he averages 2 to 3 blocks this season and is like one of the MVP defensive player candidates. That is something I could definitely see end up being in the conversation. I don't think he'll actually win it this year, but I could see him being somewhere in the conversation for just defensive player of the year. Now, if he does, I mean, look, he could very well be a 25 point a game guy, give you 8 to 10 rebounds, and give you a handful of assists or something, right? I mean, that's kind of the projections for him, is to be this like incredible, he's going to come in the league and average 30 immediately, right? I don't really think that. I think he'll be somewhere in like that 18 to 20 range, because I do think he'll be a high usage. They'll run a lot of offense through him, so I think he'll get the attempts to be great offensively. But I want people to calm expectations with Victor Wembanyama, right? Like, people forget, LeBron came into the league with all that hype, all of that excitement, and yes, he delivered. I mean, he averaged, 25-5, like, his rookie season, and by year 3, he was leading them to the NBA Finals. Like, he was a once-in-a-multi-generation talent, literally. You're talking about arguably, if not, the greatest player ever, right? And that was the expectations for him coming into the league, right? And now Victor's even more hyped. I'm not saying he can't be. He very well could. I mean, he could be, by the time his career is over, the clear-cut greatest player ever, and it's just not even close, right? It's just, maybe he has 10 NBA championships and just an absolute powerhouse and one of the greatest two-way players we've ever seen. That very well could be a possibility. But history has showed us that more likely than not, that's not going to be the case. It doesn't mean he can't be a Hall of Famer. Even if he's a top 15, 20 player, you're talking about a generational player, right, of all time, right? So time will tell, we'll see. But, he's a guy that's going to be a big face of this league for a very long time. But moving on to Chet, people forget Chet was basically Victor Wembanyama before Victor Wembanyama, right? He was the number 2 pick in the draft, and this was a guy that has ridiculous size, ridiculous length, just like Victor. He's 7'1" height as opposed to 7'4", so he does give up a couple inches, but still at 7'1", and what Chet can do and operate, he's still only 21. He was drafted at 20, but again, remember, he got hurt, as I mentioned. Him, too, kind of needs to grow into his grown man body, needs to put on a little weight, little size. Both him and Victor are very similar weights. Chet is around 207, and Victor is around 209. So, again, very, very slim. But again, this is a guy that can do everything, right? Just like people talk about Victor Wembanyama and his ability to stretch the floor and operate as almost like this point guard and just do these crazy things, right? Like, Chet's doing a lot of that stuff too, right? Chet's out here knocking down threes like he's a sharpshooter, going over, crossing up guys, taking it to the rim, flushing it home, blocking shots. I mean, the guy is very refined and very talented. And, I mean, again, he could easily be a top 5 to 10 player in the next 5 years, right? I mean, if you jumped into a time machine and told me Chet Holmgren turned out to be a better player than Victor Wembanyama, it wouldn't shock me, right? Like, I'm not saying he will be, right? But if he ends up becoming that, again, I wouldn't be shocked at all. The problem is he just doesn't have the PR behind him, right? He doesn't have the marketing the way that Victor did. Victor, they really revolutionized him. And I mean, look, don't get me wrong, he was like a highlight reel like all summer, right? Like he was a guy that just, from shooting the three to like going and getting his own rebound and dunking it back in and stuff, like just seemed like every other day there was some insane highlight. He's the more athlete, right? The more athletic, more athleticism than Chet. But again, Chet isn't like some slouch, man. This dude is a baller. And there was a lot of talk, a lot of hype, a lot of belief that he was going to be this like huge prodigy type basketball player. This real guy that's going to come in and make an impact immediately for OKC. A guy that can go get you 20 year one. And then he got hurt, and now we're in year one. He very well could. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Chet Holmgren ends up winning Rookie of the Year. At all. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the conversation for just defensive player, and he averages 2 to 3 blocks. I mean, he's been having block parties pretty much all summer league, and then so far in these preseason games. And again, he's got the size and the length to just be disruptive and, be a nightmare on the defensive end. And so I look at these two matchups and I look at Chet Holmgren, even him, he has a 7'6" wingspan, I think, right? And I'm like, okay, they're very comparable defensively, right? Offensively, I think they're very comparable. Like, Chet Holmgren has already shown the ability to be a 3-level scorer, be a guy that can take you off the dribble, get to the basket, knock down the 3 ball with efficiency, knock down the mid-range, right? Like, I look at Chet and I'm just like, what can Victor do that Chet can't, right? Like, I don't really think anything, if much at all, right? Again, Victor is the better probably athlete, but I wouldn't be surprised if Chet ends up giving him a run for his money the entirety of his career. I mean, these two guys are going to be special. These two guys are going to be a lot of fun to watch for years and years to come. Hopefully they can stay healthy, right? Because, again, they do have like a very thin, frail frame for somebody that is the size in which they are. But I'm really looking forward to just seeing the direction of these two players. And the fact that they're both in the West, we're going to get to see them 4 times a year just go at it. I can't wait for the future playoff matchups, because these two are going to be facing off in the playoffs at some point in very likely the near future. And to just see that showdown, to see that matchup, two, over 7-foot guys just competing at the highest level. Like, man, like the only thing that would make this rivalry better, in my opinion, is if like one was in the East, one was in the West, and we got that like magic bird showdown for years. Whereas like, every year, every other year, it's just like Chet versus Victor. Like that would be a lot of fun. But, again, I wouldn't be surprised if either of these guys finish their careers with multiple championships. Both are in the top, 15 to 20 all time, and really just lighten up the league. You could be looking at two big faces of the NBA for a very long time. Both of these guys are very special, very talented, and in my opinion, again, very similar. I just think Victor has the PR behind him more than Chet does, right? And I also think the fact that, he went to the Spurs, I think is only going to help that and highlight that more. Just because, him being a French player and then Greg Popovich and all that stuff. Like, I just think that, like, it's like the stage is set perfectly for Victor. Where Chet, he's tucked away in OKC, right? Like, he didn't have, like, that insane hype. I mean, he was hyped. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Chet Holmgren was very hyped coming in the league, right? And, he was, in many people's eyes, the clear-cut number 1 pick, and it was crazy and surprising when he went number 2. But, regardless, I'm just pumped to see it. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel about Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren? Do you agree with me that, they're very similar players? Is there anything one guy you think can do better than the other? I think Chet is a little more refined right now. But he's also 2 years older, right? But I do think like he's a little more fluid at times, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But regardless, I mean, I think these two are ridiculous. But are you as hyped as I am? How do you feel? Love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments.